Jim Shortreed here from the Victoria Herring Enhancement Project, reporting from Victoria. By way of truth and reconciliation, the Salish Sea First Nations did not cause the collapse of the Salish Sea Pacific herring. Us settlers did that. So it's to us settlers who must now rebuild the Salish Sea Pacific herring. The first documented transplant took place long before these days now, in the days of legend long ago, when Raven, most clever of all, brought the herring to Nulu from Namu. Such was the legend recorded by Frank Bowes in Bella Bella in 1923. Fast forward to 2014, when the Archaeology Department of Simon Fraser University did their excavations of the Nulu and Namu middens, and found, sure enough, that herring bones were plentiful from now back to 7,000 years ago in Namu, and back to 2,400 years ago in Nulu. But no herring bones were found in Nulu past 2,400 years ago. Was Raven a man towing cedar branches laden with spawn to his village? Or was Raven a legend, a herring whisperer per se? We'll start out here in Victoria in our legendary gorge waters, which once supported 16,000 metric tons of herring. Alas, right now it seems that the unique genome gorge herring is so rare that it could be extinct. So when you hear me say gorge herring, I could also be saying Pacific herring from Haida Gwaii, Prince Rupert District, Central Coast, the west coast of Vancouver Island, Souk, Victoria, Southern Gulf Islands, Discovery Islands, Campbell River, Sunshine Coast, and Cherry Point. There's a huge lack of herring everywhere on the BC coast, except between Comox and Nanaimo. Perhaps the gorge herring will come back all by themselves, like they once were in the great glorious old days of the gorge herring, when they plugged the gorge with life. Gazillions upon gazillions of birds, of a gazillion different species. Seals, sea lions, elephant seals even. Dolphins chase herring, and killer whales chase dolphins. Predators we know and love live right below the herring. Halibut come in from the Pacific. Coho come in and out of the coal quits. Chinook get big and fat for the long uphill slog up the Fraser. And being big and fat, the Chinook feed the people and the orcas in the harbor. Such were the old days. The perfect gorge herring spawning grounds do exist, right here, right now. The people of the gorge have done a great job cleaning up the gorge. You won't find cleaner urban waters anywhere in BC. The 66 hectares of eelgrass are clean and healthy and ready for spawn. Once the eelgrass is spawned on, the Pacific herring will do what they do best and multiply towards the gazillions. If we stop fishing and start enhancing. The story of nylon herring enhancement begins with a transplant. A fresh log boom was towed into Squamish terminals, heavily laden with herring spawn. The spawn hatched out, and as predicted, 3 years later, the mature herring returned to spawn. They spawned on creosote pilings supporting the terminal. The stream keepers saw the spawn and saw the poor survival rates. The spawn was either poisoned by the creosote directly, or by the oil slick that rode up and down the pilings with the tide. So with great labor, they wrapped 80 pilings with Enviro wrap, and things got a bit better for the next year's spawn. They put a long net in the water below the deck of the terminal, which worked even better. Squamish terminals, unfortunately, burnt to the waterline, and the herring seemed to have migrated off to the bladder rack on the shore near wood fiber. Another transplant of sorts happened at Fisherman's Wharf, False Creek, Vancouver. It is said that a herring skiff came in loaded with herring, loaded with ripe roe. and the last thing the herring did before dying was spawn. Damned inconsiderate herring. The fishermen had to flush the whole mess of dead, worthless herring and live spawn into the harbor. 3 years later, the herring returned to spawn on the creosote pilings, and the newly invented nylon spawn enhancement panel was deployed. Right then, right there, right in front of the spawning herring. 10 years later, they built the returning herring to 38 tons estimated every spring. They fill up 160 nylon panels with spawn every spring. They have spent 5 years researching a spawn transfer program with approvals from DFO and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and have done the first year transfer to Coal Harbour, Vancouver. Nylon has recently proved effective in urban waters. If you can get the nylon in where the herring are spawning, right then, right there. The First Nations put boughs and kelp in the water to attract spawn. This is a proven effective method, proven over many millennia. The herring will spawn readily on mackerel kelp. Added bonus, the mackerel was also edible and nutritious. Alas, mackerel doesn't grow in Victoria or the Salish Sea. The coast Salish use cedar and hemlock boughs to attract spawn. The spawn is easy to scrape off cedar and hemlock. Few needles transfer, making the spawn quite delicious. I use Douglas fir, which offers 360-degree prickly protection from predation. The fir needles also render the spawn inedible. Songhee's legend has it that cedar was placed on the shores to show the herring the way to the Portage Inlet eelgrass. The gorge is our special backyard, and many people help keep it clean. Let's take the next step and find the last few gorge herring and enhance the heck out of them back into the gazillions. Today we look at herring spawn enhancement panels. We're going to have two types today. The Douglas fir is the first type. This is just a bunch of windfalls of Douglas fir, and I'm going to lash them together with biodegradable cotton string. A large branch would do just as well, and a small tree is the very best. It should be dense enough so that the herring feels secure and protected while spawning. Now, I have been warned against First Nation cultural appropriation by putting boughs in the sea to get herring spawn. And I haven't yet got any guidance from First Nations on this question. But I'm using Douglas fir because herring like to spawn on Douglas fir, and the needles give 360-degree prickly protection from predation, and you can't eat the spawn on fir. And I'm also doing this to enhance the spawn, not to eat or sell it. Now, as you can see, it passed a very vigorous up and down shaking test, and nothing fell off, including the sock full of rocks. And so I'm attaching a nylon lanyard to the top of it now. I have to make sure we get that nylon lanyard back at the end of the season. That's plastic, we don't want it in the environment. And so then I drop it over the edge of the wharf and into the water, put the boughs all in the water. It's going to float up and down with the tide and never get the oil slick on the spawn. 2 round turns, 2 half hitches, and it's secured. And now, the nylon spawn enhancement panel. This knotless nylon is readily available, and the panels are easy to make with sap straps and scissors. I'm using 2 rocks at the bottom for sinkers. These panels are very successful in False Creek, Vancouver. They get upwards of 170 panels of spawn each spring. Why don't you volunteer to be a False Creek spawn panel monitor? Give it a vigorous, darn good up and down shake to make sure it's all strong, and then into the water it goes. underwater, we see the nylon enhancement panel and the flora and fauna of the underdock behind. And there is the Douglas fir. Which one do you think will get spawned on? Healthy eelgrass with no herring is a common refrain in the Salish Sea. Nylon enhancement panels have shown at Fisherman's Wharf and Squamish terminals that herring can be enhanced, and herring will thrive if we just aid and abet the simple hatch-out process. Research is what's needed. It's very simple to engage in marina enhancement research. I can lend you the nylon enhancement panels, and Douglas fir panels are cheap and easy to make. So set up a simple enhancement experiment and see if there are any herring spawning in your marina. If there are, get the local college to study and document your spawn. UBC has a study program ongoing at Falls Creek. If you find no spawn, your marina could qualify for a transplant. The future has a great need of herring research. There are precious few herring in Haida Gwaii, Prince Rupert District, Central Coast, West Coast of Vancouver Island, Souk, Victoria, Southern Gulf Islands, Discovery Islands, Campbell River, Sunshine Coast, and Cherry Point. All these once very productive spawning grounds need to be full of spawning herring. I'd like to thank Conservancy Hornby Island for giving me the opportunity to give this talk, and for their past and ongoing support for the Salish Sea herring, and for their love of the last great herring spawning grounds of Lambert Channel. Thank you. Jim Shortreed, Victoria.